the resentment that we often feel for doctor life. I feel like this is going to be a really spicy one. Unpaid overtime, or just overtime in general, even if you are being paid, that takes something away from you doing presentations for work, working on them in your spare time, research projects, whether you signed up for them, whether they're mandatory.
Oh, now I have to do this thing. I'm not going to get this thing done. And then catastrophizing, spiraling, sadness and resentment for these things that displace my plans.
We can see how there was an expectation and what happened in reality fell short of that expectation. And the expectation was the problem that caused the resentment.
Resentment is a lie.
I was the biggest victim ever. I was so burnt out and it was everybody else's fault but mine. So I know how that feels to listen to what Becc just said and be like, nah, she's wrong.
You need to go and look at that resentment to stop carrying it around, to stop letting it affect you, to stop letting it drag your energy down with you, and let that be the thing that colors everything you do that day.
Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Becc.
And I am Christine Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors. So welcome everyone, our beautiful friends, our doctor humans. Welcome back to another episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors. And today we have a very special little episode for you. I feel like this is going to be a really spicy one, if I'm honest. We are going to be talking about the resentment that we sometimes / often feel for doctor life. It comes in phases, I think. I'll have sometimes and I'll have lots. It just depends what mood I'm in.
Sometimes wasn't the word that I thought you were going to say then.
Sometimes I feel great about doctor life. But it is something that I think that we would like to talk about today for a few different reasons. And I know, Becc, you had a story from yesterday where you were feeling this come up in your life as well. And so I can't wait to get into that. But I guess just to sort of throw this to you guys who are listening about examples from doctor life where you might find resentment. In our last episode, I was being coached by Becc on my, I guess you could call it resentment. There was a lot of different emotions in there as well as resentment about on-call and how that was really coming from a really deep-rooted place. And Becc had helped me unpack that. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I think you'll get a lot out of it. If you, like me, find on-call challenging in that way emotionally. But the truth is that on-call is just one of the places that this can show up for us. I think another great example is unpaid overtime, or just overtime in general. Even if you are being paid, that takes something away from you, your life at large. So overtime in general, doing presentations for work, working on them in your spare time in order to present them at work, research projects, whether you signed up for them, whether they're mandatory as part of your training program, either way, you can still feel that resentment in the moment when you're sitting there trying to get through them. Even meetings at work as well. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I just feel like you go to meetings at work and it could have been an email. I resent emails too. Is there anything I don't resent sometimes? But meetings at work sometimes can feel like they are draining your lifeblood, your time for some reason, and you can just feel like, why do I have to be here? I need to be somewhere else so I can not do overtime tonight or whatever it is. So those are just a few examples. And if you guys have any more examples that we've missed, feel free to pop them in the box below. But I guess that's plenty to be getting on with. And so what we're going to do today is, now that we have all those examples top of mind and you're tuning into whether you have resentment in any of these areas like we have had or do along the way, and we're going to unpack not just that these are sources of resentment, but also what can you do about them. So hopefully by the end of this conversation, everyone listening is going to have a bit of a strategy, a bit of a solution as to how to overcome this issue. And Becc, you were saying that this popped up for you just yesterday.
Yes, I would really like to just land this concept with some humility from myself, because this was an experience that I had just yesterday in my life. And I've done this work on resentment over the last 5 to 10 years, to be honest. And it's still something that comes up for me. It occurs in my life. I have this resentment sort of experience, and I need to then be able to manage myself, manage my mind, show up for myself in order to not be dragged down by this resentment, because the experience itself, it sucks. And I think for a lot of us, we experience it also as something that just seems logical and inevitable, reasonable in these scenarios, which it is. But for me, because of the coaching work that I was lucky to do so many years ago, my coaching then helped me see that actually this isn't something that has to weigh me down in my life. And yet, as I just mentioned, it still is something that happens in my life. And the human solution is not going to be that you listen to this podcast episode and you never feel resentment again. Sorry. But the solution is wonderful, which is that in a real life example for me, yesterday I was noticing myself feeling this resentment and I was able to climb out of it so quickly and get back into just simply the first level is stopping hurting myself, right? To stop hurting myself, to stop weighing myself down, stop dragging myself down with this resentment feeling, but also just get closer to the truth and climb out of the lie that there is something for me to resent here. So let me tell you the situation. It's a non-medical situation. We're going to take you out of your context that might feel quite hard to work with and just try and put yourself in this personal situation in your life as well as you're listening to the story. Another ongoing coaching topic for me is my time scarcity. Simply meaning I carry around the belief in my life most of the time that I don't have enough time to achieve all the things that I want to achieve and to have the experiences in my life that I want to have. My mind's constantly trying to tell me you don't have enough time. And on that baseline, then when I find myself doing things that are deviating from my plan for the day, when unexpected things pop up, or when other priorities come up in my life, or when other people ask for my time for certain things, sometimes this can send me into a time scarcity spiral where I start thinking things like, oh no, but if I do that, then I won't have enough time for this. If I do that, then I'm going to fall behind on this. Oh, now I have to do this thing. I'm not going to get this thing done. And then catastrophizing, spiraling, sadness and resentment for these things that displace my plans. So yesterday was a perfect example of this. My partner and I were setting up his new practice. And for any of you guys who've started a practice, who've gone out on your own, you know how intense and elaborate this practice setting up can be. It's not just the infrastructure of the practice, the rooms, the renovations, little things like you've got to order the desk, the chairs, the paintings, things have to be posted on time. It all has to line up in the right time. But then there's also the operations, the systems sides of a medical practice. When you're a part of a practice, you can think, oh yes, we're just going to use this system and that system. But when you're building the system yourself, you suddenly realize, there's 5 more systems behind this system. And this system needs to talk to this system. They all need to connect to blah, blah, blah. My partner and I were going through this process and it feels like every day we take 3 steps forwards to making progress. We then discover a new thing that has to be done. And so it's like 3 steps forwards then becomes somehow a net 1 step backwards. So 3 steps forwards, 4 steps backwards. We feel more behind at the end of the day, despite working towards getting this done. And so I had done a little bit of fantasy planning for myself this weekend, and I'd thought, okay, I'm going to spend probably half of Saturday and half of Sunday with him together. We're going to be sorting out this room stuff. And the other half of the day, I'm going to have for myself, maybe even sneak in a little business work, sneak in some time with my doggies, sneak in some just like time with him, just enjoying our life. And in what should be unsurprising to me at this point in our practice setup journey, there was not extra time for that. My half a day that I planned each day turned into a full day. Now, cue the resentment. In that moment, I was driving back. I'd driven over to the practice and back probably for the 5th time that day. In my head thinking, this is such a waste of time, right? And what I'm referring to there is the driving. This irritation of driving to the practice and driving back, and this concept in my head that transit time is such a waste of time and it's also inefficient. And somehow there's this suggestion there that if we were just able to understand everything that was needed in advance just by sitting down and thinking about it and organizing ourselves and planning better, then all these unanticipated things wouldn't come up. It's a total fantasy, right? This idea that you can theorize everything that you need and know it in advance of actually taking the action. And yet my mind was offering me those thoughts that felt so true. The other part of this fantasy that was feeding into this resentment was also this arbitrary made-up idea that it would take us half a day to do whatever needed to be done. Can we please just acknowledge that that half a day was arbitrary? There was nothing data-backed, there was nothing scientific, there was not even a strong educated guess that half a day was a reasonable amount of time. But my mind had just decided, and I'd latched onto this idea that half a day was the time we were going to spend, and then the rest of the day we would be free. And with that freedom, we'd also be feeling the success of all the progress we made. With this resentment, I've done enough work now in the past to have these little alarm bells go off in my mind that basically say to me, Becc, if you're feeling resentment, A, you need to, for yourself, not for anybody else, not even for my partner or for a relationship, but for myself, you need to go and look at that resentment to stop carrying it around, to stop letting it affect you, to stop letting it drag your energy down with you, and let that be the thing that colors everything you do that day. And then 2, the most profound level of the work that I've done in the past, not only with that first point that you want to do this for yourself, you want to look at that resentment for yourself, but there's also now this baseline understanding that that resentment for me is a lie.
This is absolute gold. I'm just writing notes because there's a lot of things coming through. And I think what's really interesting is what you were describing there was an expectation that you had set up due to fantasy planning, due to telling yourself that X would take Y amount of time, and it was unrealistic. But I think it's we can see how there was an expectation, and what happened in reality fell short of that expectation. And the expectation was the problem that caused the resentment. So I think that's interesting. And then the other side of that, just thinking back to our last episode, when I was talking about on call, I was not doing things. I wasn't going out for dinner. I wasn't going to the gym. I wasn't doing things because I did not want to feel resentment. And you actually just said about climbing out of the lie and understanding that resentment is taking something from you. You seem to have that insight, and that you understand, I need to look at this resentment because it's weighing me down, I think is what you said. So I think it's interesting that to also acknowledge that resentment itself is a negative energetic vortex. It's going to take something from you, and not only are you often creating it, like I was, you were. So there are circumstances, but there's also our own role to play, which is where I ended up last week. I was like, oh, so all of this is, that caused this. Okay, yeah, as usual. That's what I usually end up in coaching. But yeah, that's where my head's at. I think there's layers to this.
That's so elegantly said, summarized beautifully, exactly. When there's no expectations, then there's probably not going to be any resentment there. There's no sense of loss. And unfortunately, so many of us bypass this resentment because we know how bad it feels by just not setting the expectations. But we know, guys, our plan here to feel better in life is not going to be dropping our standards. It's not going to be lowering our expectations. So pick up on that little trap that you can fall into. You're not really helping yourself there by that avoidance, by not setting standards, by not shooting high, by not having expectations. You're not actually avoiding pain. You're just delaying that pain and changing the flavor of the pain a little bit. And then also here, when you do try and set the standards and hold high expectations to get the benefits of that, you, like me, can end up with resentment. And here's the thing. Now you can actually solve the problem from this point. And we can even just use the example in this scenario. My partner, he did not want to be doing this stuff on the weekend either himself, right? Let's make that very clear. And yet he was going about essentially the same day as me, doing the work as a team. We're just getting the stuff done. And he wasn't feeling resentment, right? So it wasn't the situation that was causing the resentment. We were both in the same situation. but we were having a different experience and he was having a better experience and probably being more productive because he wasn't dragging himself down with resentment. So we've just got to ask, A, which kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be the Becc in this situation, or do you want to be more like him? Probably more like him. And then if you want to be more like him, all we need to do is look at our thoughts and emotions. This is a solution. And let me give you the little shortcut that what I found over the years. And this is why it was easy for me to climb out of this scenario really quickly. And I just want to know it's not going to be easy at first, but it's really worth doing the work, because then you get to have this quick fix later on. Like I said, I have this self-awareness that I built up over time of that resentment feeling, right? I'm really tuned in to where my body is feeling resentment. I'm sure it flies under the radar a lot of the time, but the moment it catches my awareness, I'm like, okay, here we go. This matters. So I want you to tell yourself, I want you to care enough about yourself to also say, I care when I feel resentment. I want to see when I feel this resentment. And that only matters because you need to have this next layer of belief, which is, and I can change that. And I'm not stuck here, because a lot of us just believe, that great, we can recognize the resentment, but once we're in resentment, if we pay attention to it, we think that it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So we need to develop the relationship with ourselves where we recognize, no, I don't let these experiences and emotions spiral out of control. I'm not out of control. I can use my mind and my emotions, my energy to change this experience. And then we invite in the third layer, which I referenced before, which is resentment is a lie. The first time you hear this, I will not be surprised if you're like, that's total rubbish, Becc. Here are all the reasons why it's valid to feel resentment right here. Well, that is the reason why I don't want you to just tell yourself like this little, angel on your shoulder being like, resentment is a lie. Just be happy all the time. Just appreciate what you have. That's not how this works. You need to understand that. It needs to be this reminder to yourself that resentment is a lie, not something that you're just telling yourself. I can now hear that as a reminder rather than something that somebody's telling me. It's a reminder about what's true, is because in the past, in all my resentment experiences, whether they're in the hospital or whether they're in my personal life, I've looked at my thoughts, the thoughts that were creating the resentment. And Christine just bundled that up in this most amazing formula before. She was like, expectations minus reality. And then whatever is left over, if the reality is less than the expectations, then you'll have resentment, then you'll be unhappy, right? But if your reality is greater than your expectations, then you're probably going to feel fantastic. But resentment and that pain, whatever flavor of emotional pain, will come from your reality being less than your expectations. So then we just have to look at our expectations and reality. For me, I can see here that my expectations, I told you my story, I was laughing at the expectations that I've made up, because as much as I like the sound of them, they are made up. They're arbitrary. They're not the way that the world should be. I made them up. But here's the real empowered, most impactful solution to me in terms of lies and thought errors that I found in my thoughts throughout this resentment work that I've done. And that is the lie that I'm somehow stuck in this situation, that there is some external outside force, some person forcing me to do whatever I'm doing, to drive over to the practice and back, however, for the 5th time that morning, or to use my weekend doing this. And for you guys, for you to be doing that on-call shift, to be doing that research project, to be showing up to that meeting, to be preparing for the meeting. It is a lie that anybody is forcing you to do this, right? And one of my coaches actually has this analogy that's really awesome that she takes to an extreme. I like these extremes. They're the good thought experiments of my mind. And the analogy is paying your taxes, right? We resent paying our taxes. But even paying our taxes, nobody is forcing us to do that. But instead, we as autonomous human adults who make their own decisions, we decide to pay our taxes in exchange for not having to suffer the consequences of it. Right? And that is what's happening here too. And that's why Christine was amenable to exploring her thoughts and wanting to change how she was feeling in that last on-call session when we just talked about what was going on there, is because she already knew on a background that she wanted to be doing that on-call transplant work. She already knew on a greater scale that she wanted to be working in that healthcare system, that she wanted to be working in the public system. And if somebody came and snatched that away from her, she would be very, very unhappy. And so in that way, we see the resentment for this situation is a lie. No one is forcing you to do this thing, to be there in this moment. But actually, the truth here is this is your choice. This is, stretched even further, actually what you want. You are always choosing. For me, it's just a little hop, skip, and a jump over to, oh my gosh, I am actually, and this isn't positive thinking, this is genuinely me exploring my thoughts over the years and having these thoughts like the tip of my tongue, these things I believe. I am so grateful to be in this relationship with my partner. I'm so grateful to be a team that does things together. I'm so grateful he wants to involve me in these things. I'm so grateful that I get to play a part in this. I'm so grateful that we get to create this for us. I'm so grateful that we get to create this for him. I'm so grateful that we have this opportunity to do this. I'm so grateful that I get to choose to use my time and that I have the time to do this. Those things are more true to me, and they feel true the moment I remind myself of them, than this idea that I'm being forced into this situation, that I'm being stuck.
It's great, right? I absolutely love this. And I was thinking it's so much better than what I had, which was I was thinking, oh, the antidote is surrender, because there's a lot of resistance and resentment. But then the surrender that I thought I was doing was really just like in that example of being on call, not doing things so that I wouldn't feel the resentment. To me, that was my solution. And it felt like a really positive solution until you realize actually no, because now I just resent not being able to do anything.
Yeah.
So just like all the things. But I guess I was thinking about how, is it like a domino effect? Right. So say I'm on call and I resent it, and the expectations I've made, which are, as you've pointed out, not even truths, they're just like lies that I've told myself. Then I'm going to fall short of those expectations. Then I'm going to get resentment. When I'm in resentment, I get to say, oh, wait a minute, actually, I choose this. That sounds so much more empowering than the surrender thing, which is disempowering actually in this specific scenario. So that sounds amazing. But then, okay, so I've chosen that and I'm saying this is my choice. It doesn't necessarily still feel good though.
Okay, yeah, because you're just telling yourself, you're just trying to tell yourself, I'm choosing this. Big difference from actually going and exploring your thoughts. And this is why thought work, mind management doesn't work for people. And this is why people look at it and they're like, nah, I don't buy it. Or they'll try, they use willpower. They'll just be like, I'll just tell myself I'm choosing for the next 2 weeks and then I'll suddenly feel better. No, you need to believe it. You don't get to take the shortcut.
That's inconvenient.
And so this is why this work feels worse before it feels better, because what you need to do is you need to go into the story of your resentment. You need to go and you need to get an A4 page and you need to do what I call a thought download, where you just get out all those ugly thoughts about what you resent and who you resent and why you resent it and why it's the worst thing ever and why you're such a victim and why everything's terrible and bad and you're stuck. You need to go there first.
Yeah.
And
I think that's really helpful. Yeah.
But you do. And guys, the thing that stops us from doing this is where we feel embarrassed and ashamed of those thoughts. And I just want to be the first person right now to remind you, yesterday, me as a coach who's been doing this work for 10 years on myself, I still have those thoughts come up. I still have those ugly thoughts. I call them ugly thoughts because they're just the thoughts I don't like. I wouldn't be proud of them. I don't really want to put them on the podcast. But the truth is, I was thinking those thoughts yesterday that were causing this resentment. If I just ignore them, if I pretend they're not there, they're going to stay there. But you have to first have enough self-trust and enough of a baseline of empowerment to recognize I can see these thoughts, I can lean into these thoughts, and they don't say anything about me as a person. They're not something that when I look at them and give them attention, they're going to grow out of control and I'm not going to be able to get a handle of them. You need to be able to have your own back enough and to have done this work enough. There's a bit of chicken and egg to be able to know that you can lean into that. It's going to feel worse, but then you can make it better because you take care of yourself. But the shortcut doesn't exist to just saying, I'm always choosing. So we want to put that there as your goal. But I never want you to dismiss yourself and be like, oh, Becc said, just tell myself I'm not really stuck. I'm not really a victim. I'm just choosing. It won't work. It's just going to make you judge yourself more. You need to go in. And for me, when I see the thought, for example, I wish I wasn't doing this. This isn't fair. Here's a thought that hurts. When I say, it hurts on two levels. When I say, I'm wasting my time. I think about sitting in front of my partner, and I'm ashamed to say I've said this to my partner when it comes to this teamwork that we do together. We're really good at operating as a team to get things done. And I've said this to my partner and I'm ashamed of it. Now that I can see the line, and I've said, this is a waste of time. If I feel like I'm doing something that is outsourceable or, I don't know, just inefficient or something like that, but it's contributing to us. I'm ashamed of that thought because what it's also saying is, I don't think the steps that need to be done on this path are worthwhile. They're not worth my time. And with that, I'm sort of saying the goal, what we're trying to create here, isn't worth my time. Or even worse, what you want, what we want as a couple, isn't worth my time. I don't believe those thoughts, right? When I look at what I'm really saying underneath that, but the thought, this is a waste of time, when I'm just driving back and forth all day, I believe that thought. Like that superficial level thought, I'm like, ouch, yes, it's a waste of time. This is so sad, resentment. But only when I look at my thoughts underneath it, when I look at what's propping that up, I'm like, wait a second, I do not believe that. And I'm actually sorry that I'm thinking that way about this situation. I don't want to be the person who's thinking that way about this situation. You know what? I don't actually think that about this situation. I think this is a good use of my time. Yeah, I'm sad that I can't use it for other things. That's not even true. Yeah, I'm sad that I am choosing not to use it for other things. And also, I'd make this choice again, looking at all the things that we want to create and all the things I want to keep in my life. So it's humbling. It's really hard. But if you just try and put positive thinking on top and you're not willing to lean into those ugly thoughts, you don't get to have this empowerment, which is the only solution to resentment, which is essentially disempowerment here.
Yeah, and I love that. And as you were talking about that kind of victimhood situation, it came to me that when you're in, no judgment to anyone who's listening, I've definitely been in that, especially in my advanced training as a Reno Reg. Oh my goodness, I was the biggest victim ever. I was so burnt out and it was everybody else's fault but mine. So I know how that feels. I say this from a place of personal experience, but when you're in that place, you don't want the other thing to be true. Like you don't want it to be anything to do with you. So you can have this tendency initially to defend it, to die on that hill, and to listen to what Beck's just said and be like, nah, she's wrong. She doesn't know who I am. She doesn't know what my life is like. She's never walked in my little very tired shoes. And you know what I mean? You can get that kind of attitude coming up. And so I think it's also what you're kind of saying is this is just a first step, like actually accepting that there is an empowered way to be in the situation or an empowered way to think in the situation is actually the first step. Because a lot of people, when this first is put to them, when you are suffering from a lot of resentment for a lot of doctor life things that we mentioned at the start, I just empathize so much with that victimhood mentality and how hard it is to climb out of that when you're there. So sending so much love to that as well.
Absolutely. And just rewinding back, remember guys, that first step was to recognize when you're feeling resentment. Just take this bit for us. The next time you feel resentment, I just want you to tap into your body. Take a moment. This will take you 10 seconds. For a lot of us, you probably won't even be able to stay with the emotion for 10 seconds. Turn your awareness into your body and notice How is resentment affecting me right now? Just literally, what sensations is it creating? Is it making me feel energized and expansive, in terms of energy? Or is it making me feel contracted and small and heavy and tense? Am I feeling uncomfortable anywhere? For me, it's like probably a little bit in my throat, a bit of discomfort, my chest and my stomach, just kind of this sick feeling. And just from that understanding, you can see, as long as I'm feeling this resentment, I'm hurting myself. And what we know from mindset coaching and why we care so much about your thoughts is because your thoughts create your emotions or your energetic state. What your mind's perceiving, what your mind believes is happening in your world right now, and what's happening to you determines how you feel. And then how you feel is what drives your actions. I just want to think about this one aspect of, I would stop being really productive and effective and engaged with the day, which would slow me down, right? It would end up ironically making it take more time to get done what I want to get done. I'd stop being proactive and just getting things done. And then also for me, my resentment was so easily turned towards the people around me. And the whole point of me doing this work and using this time is because I want to be the kind of person who shows up this way in life. I want to be the person who creates this relationship and shows up this way for my relationship. I want to be this person towards my partner in this situation. And so I'm going against, as long as I'm feeling that resentment, it's sabotaging what I want. So if you can just recognize, I know resentment feels valid, and in ways it is. But do we care if it's true, if it's hurting you? Do we care if it's valid, if it's sabotaging your goals and it's making you feel worse? So just start there, because you're going to need that motivation and that recognition that resentment is not for you, it's against you, in order to do that more challenging thought work to come. All right, my beautiful friends, let us know where you humbly are with this concept. As Christine said, it is not easy, but can we just emphasize with, it is common, it is human. We all go through it. I went through it yesterday, right? And I'm not proud of my thoughts, but that doesn't matter. I'm a human. I have ugly thoughts sometimes. And what matters more is what you do when you recognize it. That's what really determines who you are. Let us know where your resentment comes up. Let us know how it affects you and what you're going to do about it. And we can't wait to see you guys in our next one.
Bye.